Hi again, and welcome to another live around Amesbury, all coming from our respective homes. I'm your host, Meryl Goldsmith, and I really appreciate you tuning in this morning. So, we've got Executive Director John Mayer, who's Executive Director of the Amesbury Carriage Museum, and he's going to be joining us. And we're actually going to be taking your live questions on Facebook. So, if you're watching on channels 12 or 18 or online, thank you very much. You can also watch live on Facebook, and that's where you can submit your questions. So the show's going to be about a half hour long, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you a gentleman who is entering his 5th year as Executive Director of the Amesbury Carriage Museum. Hi, John, and I understand that we also need to say happy birthday. Today is your birthday?
You lose count as you get a little bit further on, but yes, thanks. I appreciate it.
Well, before we get going, how have you and your family been coping with this whole COVID-19 coronavirus situation? Is everybody okay, managing to, make it through every day?
Yeah, we definitely are. My wife works has been working remotely. She started working at home before I closed our office. I think both of us, have done 9 gazillion Zoom calls. Seems like there's no difference between Monday or Sunday. There's always work going on. So in a way, we're engaged, fatigued. And I have 2 boys, and each of them are doing well. But thank you. I do understand this is just an incredible time. And when I go into Amesbury, I definitely feel that. I feel, the challenge this has put on our community. And, I think I share with you the good wishes that we can start to recover and get back to some stable place.
It is so weird that, I forget, it may have been my son who said, so, what do you do weekend? And I don't even know what day it is. Well, today I do because we're doing this. But, normally it's like it's just another day. So
Yeah.
anyway, John, I do want to remind everybody again, if you've got a question or you want to know something about the Amesbury Carriage Museum, please get them up on Facebook, right? And John, can you just start off with just a short introduction for those who are not really that familiar with the Amesbury Carriage Museum? Can you fill us in a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Meryl. So as you said, this is the start of my 5th year with the museum. And I began with the museum just on the verge of a launch for something that we were going to call the Amesbury Heritage Center, a partnership with the Amesbury Chamber of Commerce. And we just realized that that particular plan was a bit of an overreach. The amount of money that we were looking to raise to build out a building, which is 29 Water Street, really was greater than what this community could support. It was really ambitious. The museum sort of revisited their mission and our focus. We've embraced a broader interest in the history of industry and work life and the people of Amesbury. And that's really propelled us forward. Since we've turned away from 29 Water Street, we've been developing a series of calendar programs that are pretty diverse, from family stories to, special programs about industry and work life in Amesbury. And that had become kind of our oeuvre, the things that we really specialize. We actually, this past weekend would have been the car show, this would have been the 5th car show that I was part of. Carriage Museum really appreciates being a contributor to that. We see, it gives us an opportunity to showcase part of Amesbury history. We're out in the community. I keep learning new things from that. When I started, I couldn't believe it, but the carriage industry made a pivot from building carriages to building bodies for automobiles. And I think about 90% of the bodies that were used by Stanley Steamers were made in shops here in Amesbury. And then that industry continued to evolve and develop. And we had one employer, which was Biddle and Smart, which their headquarters on Chestnut Street, and they had 10 different locations. They employed almost 5,000 workers, and in 1 year generated about 40,000 bodies for the Hudson Motor Company. And so just that's we keep learning more and more about what happened in Amesbury. It's just incredible and a great part of my
So I
job.
remember during the car show last year, kind of, right in Market Square, I believe there were a group of people that actually had a Stanley steamer car that was actually produced, and it was so fascinating to chat with
Right,
those people, and so amazing. 5,000 people employed just in
yeah,
one business. I mean, that's unbelievable.
right. And there were other businesses that were doing similar things. So that was just one segment of that industry. The people who came last year for the car show, it was a challenge. I think there were threats of thunderstorm all weekend. So we were scrambling to figure out how we were going to accommodate these people with their vintage cars. One of them came all the way down from upstate Maine, and they were part of the Stanley Museum. And they've come actually 3 years in a row, and they've become really good friends of the Carriage Museum. And another person who had a Stanley steamer, his family had grown up in Amesbury, and they've kept an eye on what the Carriage Museum is doing, and they've been really firm advocates and supporters of our program.
You were just reminding me, of the car show. I mean, this would also be Amesbury Days week.
Yeah,
That
right,
we'd be in the throes of it right now. It kind of,
right,
we getting back to not even knowing what day of the week it is. It really kind of
yeah,
slipped my mind that this would be, in the throes of Amesbury Days, with the fourth coming up this Saturday. So
yeah,
I do feel, I do think a lot of us feel a sense of loss. It's such a special event, whether it is, the car show or the block party or the
yeah.
children's events, really everything that goes on. And I know that the Carriage Museum was always, for years, a really, really big part of Amesbury Days.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, we continue to build our the supporting materials, and I know when we come out of this, we'll be that much stronger. Wanted to mention a couple other parts of our program. After we turned away from 29 Water Street, Greg Jardis, who owns Amesbury Industrial Supply, came forward and made an offer to the museum of space in the lower level of his building that could be our program venue. And we looked at it very closely and we accepted his offer. So it's been about 2 years that we've been all in developing plans to develop what we're calling the Industrial History Center. We've been fundraising. We have a team of architects who are helping us with this. Um, and our vision for this is that this will be a place where people can come and learn about Amesbury history, but participate in programs that bring that to the surface. As I mentioned, we do family stories. We want to bring in school groups. We want to bring in people who are new to the community, and we want to offer just a really robust series of activities and programs that don't have to be steeped in a very formal academic history, but are designed to get people involved and to share what they do and they know, and their perspective about life in Amesbury. I think it's going to be really special and really great.
And especially to, develop the online part of it, even as we make it through the summer and get into the school year. Because I mean, I can just when you were saying that, I can just think of so many different ways where we could integrate the Carriage Museum into curriculum, and whether
Yeah,
it could even be like a virtual field trip to see what's
yeah.
going on in the basement with
Well,
Greg at
that's
Amesbury Industrial. How Go
it's
ahead.
absolutely true, Meryl. Yeah. So we do if people go to the website for the Amesbury Carriage Museum, we do have a tab for educational programming. And I think it was the first year I was on staff, I worked with a group of teachers and we began to develop curriculum. So the raw material is all there. We created a new committee, a committee focused on youth and family programming, And that group has refined that curriculum, and now we have a tour that people can take of the mill yard, and there's supporting activities as well. And we just keep working more and more on this. And, I, like you, Meryl, I totally see this as such an important part of our future. And the partnership with Amesbury Industrial Supply is inspiring. Here we want to do a little interactive industrial history museum, and our partner, our neighbor, sells hardware. Sending kids into the hardware
Perfect.
store. Yeah, I know. Think of the opportunity for kids to get some experiences with, what happens there and the different tradespeople who come in and out of that place. When I share this potential with colleagues who are working in the field, they're just really blown away at what we have as an opportunity in Amesbury. It's really
Have,
remarkable.
have you had the opportunity to maybe connect with other museums of maybe, in the same size community and, doing brainstorming to come up with things? I mean, we don't want you to go away because of this awful time that we're in right now, right? But it does require stuff that you've maybe never even considered before. None of us have considered
No.
before.
Meryl, you're absolutely right, and indeed I do. I've worked in this field. My first full-time museum job in a museum was in 1979, and I worked for an industrial history museum in Wilmington, Delaware. And even before that, as a high school student, I did an internship at the Pasadena Museum of Modern Art in California. And all those experiences inspired me, and they showed me what the potential and value of a really robust museum program can be. And I've maintained connections with all these people I've worked with over those years. And every Friday morning, I have a roundtable with two directors, one at a place called the Charles River Museum in Waltham, and the other is somebody with the Waterworks Museum in Chestnut Hill. Eric Peterson and Bob Perry both were introduced to what we're doing here in Amesbury, and they've asked me to continue a conversation with them. And we're looking to create a partnership, a collaborative that would eventually bring in more and more people who are interested in industrial history. We have a relationship with people who work at the museums in Lowell, and they've helped us with a lot of conceptual thinking about our educational programming. I love this work, and my connection to people in the field, really sustains a lot of the enthusiasm that I have for this job.
Well, I remember when my son was in school, one of the pieces of the curriculum is to go to Lowell and to visit the factories. And,
Yeah,
as your space over at Amesbury Industrial, as it continues to evolve, and we get back to, actually having kids in school, maybe that's something that children can actually come down and, have some hands-on experiences. I think that those, make such an impact on our young kids.
right. It's definitely true. Well, we've done that. We've worked with fourth grade classes who make the trip to Lowell. So after their visit to Lowell, they come into the mill yard. They have already an orientation to what the story is. And what we're able to do is help connect them to Amesbury more directly. And I just would say that, the bottom line assignment, our job, is to help people develop a sense of place, to connect them to their community. And, at the end of the day, if we've done that, then I think we've done a really good thing. That perspective, I think, can shape, how they do their work in whatever field, how they participate in the life of their community, how they see what other people have done to make a difference in their world. So there's very much a community agenda that I believe in that underlies a lot of what we're doing.
I just want to remind folks, if you do have a question for John, you can go to our Facebook page. Just search for Amesbury Community TV, and you can ask a question, and Patrick will send it to me, and I will ask you, John. So
That's great.
we've got about another, 15, 20 minutes left of our show.
Yeah.
So for those who are maybe, new to us, new to you, You see all these signs around town. You go to the grocery store, it's the Carriage Town Plaza.
Right.
We just have so much symbolism of carriages. Can you speak a little bit to the history of Amesbury and carriages?
Right. Yeah. I wish I was an expert. I am still learning. And actually, it's funny when I started my job, I remember Jim Sullivan from the Newburyport Daily News made a visit, and he was interviewing me. And I just shared that, we really are trying to expand our focus. And I think Jim shortened that headline and said, "New director at the Carriage Museum, not interested in carriages." I think that was a little bit of an exaggeration. And so just to get back to your question, there was a period in Amesbury, and it really started in the 1850s and gradually developed. By about 1875, carriage making was quite an industry in Amesbury. I think there may have been 40 different shops of different sizes that were making carriages, and the reputation that Amesbury had for quality vehicles was quite high. There were a number of business owners who got involved in a national carriage association. And I think it was in 1880, they declared Amesbury the carriage capital of the United States. And then in 1881 or 1882, all of a sudden we were the carriage capital of the world. And it may be a little bit of hyperbole, but I think what they were saying is that the quality of workmanship here in Amesbury, the percentage of people who were involved in the industry itself was pretty substantial. And so Amesbury had this reputation for that kind of work. By numbers, the number of vehicles that Amesbury made did not come even close to the larger shops that were in the Midwest. But we, had a way of doing our work that was distinctive, and it was totally integrated in our community. And I think that was what gave, the inspiration of recognizing the carriage industry as a really important aspect of Amesbury's history. And we
Well, thank
celebrate
you
that.
for that.
Yeah, we do
I
celebrate
think
it.
we do, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that
What
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that, I think there's a story that happened before then. The history of the town before and the history that came after has importance and value. And we've spent a lot of time trying to understand what we call our built environment, the factory buildings that are along the powwow and some of the other things that are in our landscape. And what we were learning is, there's a narrative. It goes through these cycles, and it's a human story. People were involved in these different businesses, and they would, move from one to the other. It was not, we didn't have a single narrative here in town. And finding that out and celebrating that is a lot of fun.
Well, I'm just looking at you and looking at my computer, and I want to thank Bonnie Brady and also Carol Feingold and Bruce McBrien
Uh-oh.
for listening. Yeah, so or watching actually on Facebook. And Bruce actually just posted a question, and Bruce said, "Would like you to speak to Amesbury's amazing history of innovation." So, can you do that a little bit for us, John?
Yeah, I can. And, Bruce was one of the first people who welcomed me here. Bruce works with elementary students and has done that for much of his work life, and just has a great appreciation and enthusiasm for education. So he's been a really good friend and ally. So innovation is definitely a thing. We had a sawmill on the Powwow River in 1640, and this was one of the earliest mill sites in North America. And when you think about what an early, settler was experiencing, trying to figure out how to harness the river, how to generate a system of manufacturing lumber, it's just really fun trying to imagine what those experiences were like. A lot of that history is not well documented. So we have a volunteer group that spends a lot of time trying to navigate through all nooks and crannies of archival material. We've learned that there was a ironworks in Amesbury in 1710, which is a little after the Saugus Ironworks, but still people were harvesting native iron from the Powell River and converting that into cast iron that then could be forged into wrought iron. And that was right at the upper falls of the river. In 1796, Jacob Perkins came to Amesbury from Newburyport and established one of the first factories that was able to make nails through machinery. And that sounds completely mundane and, not so important. But up until that time, nails had to be forged by hand, and they were very precious. And having a machine that would do it it just changed the way people were able to work in their environment. One of Perkins's apprentices was a young man named Paul Moody. And we have a Moody Street in Amesbury, we have a Moody Street in Waltham, and one in Lowell. Well, Paul Moody was this genius mechanic, and he worked with Perkins to develop the machinery that was in his mill. He started to explore textile making machinery. And in 1814, Moody went to Waltham, where he was an important engineer in the integration of all stages of textile making. So he brought his knowledge that he had developed in Amesbury to Waltham, and that's where the first integrated textile factory was developed. And then in later life, we had people working in the carriage industry who were coming up with patented improvements to any number of devices for carriage making. There were machine makers that were active in the late 19th century, the automobile body makers of the early 20th century. And I think even coming into the 20th century, there are stories that we have yet to discover, and that's part of what we want to learn.
Well, I want to thank Bruce for reaching out on Facebook. And, if you would like to as well, please, just ask us a question on our Facebook feed. So I'm just thinking about, I was just listening and thinking about, you're talking about the iron, you're talking about fabric, you're talking about, all kinds of things that come together to form vehicles and carriages. And it's just amazing, John, that Amesbury was such a hub of activity.
It's true. I think, the river, the Powell played a huge role in that. And in the 18th century, Amesbury was recognized as, a place of industry. Mary Chatney, one of our board members, loves this quote that I found from, I think it was 1832, where it categorized Amesbury as a place where the productive class lived. So just, it wasn't pejorative. It was just a real sincere expression that people in this town were engaged in doing things and making things. We had sawmills and grist mills, the ironworks, textile factories, the carriage shops. There's really quite a diverse array of things that happened in the town. We'd love to know more about that early period. And like I was saying, I don't think it was a single narrative. I think people who worked in the textile mills in the summertime, when the water, started to get dry in the powwow, they were probably going back and working on farms. Or people who worked in the carriage industry, if there was a seasonal thing, they could work at boat shops. We have Lowell's Boat Shop on the Merrimack. Well, shipbuilding was a thing on the Merrimack and on the Powwow as well. So, and part of the thrill is, revealing the stories of these different people who played a role in that, even up to today. So,
and also, the hat factory. That was a whole other industry. And a friend of mine who's been on the show, I think a couple of times, who's a local author, Edith Maxwell, she incorporates this history, into her books. I want to say, I think I saw on Facebook that she has just released her 20th novel, something crazy like that. I mean, we have such treasures, treasures in terms of people and treasures in terms of facilities like the Carriage Museum here in Amesbury.
Yeah, it's true. Edith is another friend of the museum, and she's helped us with our programs. I think we're totally blessed to have people who are looking for outlets and venues and opportunities to explore and share about Amesbury history. It's a really wonderful community. We feel very supported in that regard.
So, John, if somebody is interested in, being involved in the Carriage Museum, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there are a lot of levels of involvement that are
Yes.
offered through the museum.
Thank you, Meryl. That's a really good question. I mean, first of all, I hope people will visit our website, amesburycarriagemuseum.com, and then you can get a sense of just how rich the resources are that we're developing. And much of that has been generated by volunteers. I have a group of volunteers who started working with me pretty much the first month I was on the job. We call it the Amesbury Industrial Survey Group. And there's 10 or 12 people who are part of this group. And we support kind of individual exploration of different topics. And what you'll find on our website are little narratives that have been developed that showcase the work that they've done. One very prolific member is Mike Harold, who's written about the carriage industry. He's written about some of the small buildings that are in town. And, you will find them on that part of our website, Researching People and Place. So that's one level. And that kind of volunteer work is enriching for the people who are volunteering as much as it's helping us develop more understanding of Amesbury history. But we also welcome volunteers who help us with our different committees. We're a nonprofit, so we have a pretty good structure with a finance committee, a program committee, a collections committee, a building committee, and these different groups work in different areas. Some of them are helping us develop programs. Some of them are a little bit more business or mundane, like, what are our financial plans for the future? But I would just welcome people who are interested in knowing more. I like to be out there and I welcome emails, and I'm happy to meet with people now virtually or over the phone and tell them more about what we're doing. When our History Center does open, I know that will be a much more active place than we've ever been. And I'm hoping that we can cultivate a team of people who will be like docents when we have school groups or when we want to lead a tour or if we're having an event, who can help us in different ways. So there's a pretty robust opportunity if people want to get involved. And I would also say that, one of my beliefs about the Carriage Museum is that it is a community project. It's not for me to be the determinant of what we do. I want this to really be an expression of what the community sees as, an opportunity. And the more people who get involved and help us make that happen, I think the richer and the more robust and the more resilient we're going to be.
And I think also, in these times, maybe people do have some more free time. And, because
Yeah.
it's not going to always be like this. And you're going to need,
Yeah.
whether it's docents at the new, facility, or, hopefully we will be back next summer with a full Amesbury Days and a car show and everything that goes on with that. So it can even be people who might want to, even just, say, well, I'll help you at events, because you
Right.
need those people too.
That's absolutely true. We have volunteers who help at the car show. We developed a program in 2019 that was great fun. We called it Family Day in the Mill Yard, and it was really just an open house. But we had volunteers from the museum. We had friends of the library there. We had demonstrators and machine builders, and we definitely want that to grow and become a bigger event. Throughout the year, there are opportunities for people to help. I'll mention another event too that was actually in 2019. We organized a fundraiser for the museum. We had never done something quite like that. We called it Driving Through History. And Amesbury Chevrolet allowed us to use their showroom. You mentioned those two Stanley steamers that we had. Well, we had them on view in the Amesbury Chevrolet showroom. And the afternoon we brought them in, it was great fun to watch all the people working at Amesbury Chevrolet excited to see these vintage cars. I mean, and that's just another great example of, how the community got behind something that we were doing. Sherry Buchanan and her crew were, just great supporters of that. We had volunteers, Bonnie Brady and a team of volunteers help to organize that event. John McInnes was our auctioneer for the night. And, we were really looking to do this as something that was fun and got people together. And the benefit for the museum was that we were able to raise money to help us with our operations. And, so if we can do things that people enjoy and are fun, it works out for everybody.
That must have been like so much fun to say, oh, well, can, you move that Camaro out of the way? Like we're going to put a Stanley steamer there.
Yeah.
I mean, that just must have been like, great to be there while they were setting that whole thing up.
No, definitely. It is fun. It was great. Yeah. So anyway, that's a good question about.
Go ahead, John.
No, I was just saying I was appreciating your question because the Carriage Museum really does. We do our work because of volunteers, and I am there's a lot of really dedicated people who help us do our work.
So folks can either email you, go to the website. All that information is on the website. What is your website, John?
It's AmesburyCarriageMuseum.com. Very easy to find. And there's a way to either contact or you can see my contact information. And as I said, I do welcome emails and questions. The Industrial History Center is under construction. If people go into the mill yard and they're at Flatbreads, they can see our work site and there's a construction sign. Along the lines of mundane accomplishments, we are now connected to the Amesbury sewer. So that was a great thing. We have our rough plumbing in the schools. They put windows in the building. Our construction crew is led by Ben Becker of BLB Custom Building, and his shop is on Chestnut Street, and he's just been incredible too. I mean, guess again, I'm a broken record about how we've been supported by people in Amesbury. But at any rate, the Industrial History Center is going to become more and more something that we try to put out there. We'll be looking for help to make that happen. So that's something we'll be asking our community for too.
We've chatted for over a half an hour, which I think is fantastic. John Mayer, the Executive Director of the Amesbury Carriage Museum, want to thank him, and I want to thank you for watching. We will post this up on Facebook, and it will again be available online and on channels 12 and 18. And my name is Meryl Goldsmith, and I want to thank you for watching another live around Amesbury. Have a great day.